$10 billion and over 27 million medical records breached in 2016. We're going to be talking about this and medical device security in just a minute. Hello everyone, I'm Loren Shade, Vice President of Marketing at Allegro Software, and today we're going to be talking about medical device security, a defense in-depth perspective using PKI. If you look around hospital environments or medical arenas, you'll see that there's a number of medical devices that are used for patient care and ensuring that patients are receiving the best care possible. This includes everything from the patient bedside all the way down to the diagnostic equipment that's used in the clinical areas of the hospital. Hospitals are a unique environment because they're really a system of systems. They act as large system integrators between a wide variety of vendors, and typically the vendors, it's a heterogeneous. You don't see just Philips, or you just don't see Stryker or other medical vendors there. There's a wide range of vendors that provide products to the hospitals themselves. And the cost of not getting integration right can actually be potentially life-threatening and very expensive because it has legal ramifications and financial ramifications, both in the terms of lawsuits as well as federal and potential civil penalties. Hospitals also face a unique set of challenges because the environments are always changing. And what I mean by that is doctors are always coming in and out of the doors, as well as nurses, as well as clinical teams, as well as operation teams. Hospitals have a whole collection of doctors, nurses, and clinical teams and operational environments that they need to coordinate and integrate at all times. They also have to do this with a number of vendors. And the vendors that they use for their hospital beds, the ones that they use for their infusion pumps and all the different types of equipment, they have to integrate these systems to make sure that they can create a safe and secure environment not only for patients, but also for data security. And the data security requirements that they have are actually very similar to the financial markets. Unfortunately, they have a much smaller IT budget than as a particular financial institution. So in many cases, you'll see that a hospital has all of this personal identifiable information that it is handling, and it has the same requirements to handle that as something as like a financial market. But you never see an IT organization in a hospital that's as large as one that is in a bank. In the book, The Amazon Way for IoT, there are three key areas that are and opportunities that are being created by IoT for medical devices and the IoT field in general. And what they're really looking for is to reinvent the customer and patient experience with medical devices that are part of the Internet of Medical Things. They're also looking to dramatically improve the operational effectiveness of the overall hospital, and they're also looking to be able to support new healthcare business models. And again, the source for this is the Amazon Way on IoT. So what does an oil rig have to do with medical device security? Well, data is really considered the new oil in the new economy, according to a source by the World Economic Forum. So let's talk a little bit about medical records and the hacking of medical records. And according to sources at the ITRC and Data Breach Today, data breaches increased by over 40% in the year 2016. And healthcare accounted for roughly 35% of that overall total increase. Hacking accounts for over 50% of all medical records that are being breached. And unfortunately, IO medical devices of things and the IoT of things are not immune. Have you heard of these particular types of malware? They're actually very prevalent in the IOMT and IoT environments today. And again, as cited by the ITRC and Data Breach Today, there's over 1 million infected IoT devices in medical care environments today. So why are IOMT devices being hacked, and why are they particularly hacking targets? Well, IOMT, or IO of medical things, and hospitals are great aggregators of large quantities of personally identifiable information. And the hospitals are typically well equipped to save lives, but they're ill equipped to handle cyber attacks. And in the case of IOMT, they also handle significant amounts of personally identifiable information. So let's take a second and talk a little bit about medical record breaches. In 2016, there were over 27 million medical records breached and turned out into the open. That's a net worth of over $500 million on the black market. According to the sources below, that says that each one of those medical records is worth between $20 and $40 a piece, compared to the measly $5 for a financial record. This equates to about $10 billion in remediation that hospital and healthcare environments pay, because the average cost to remediate a stolen record is roughly $402 a piece. So what can we do to reduce the risk of a breach, particularly with IOMT and IoT devices in medical environments? Well, the high-tech HIPAA and NIST 800-122 offer a number of suggestions and guidelines for making sure that you access and store and transmit data securely. These are not only just implementing technology, but they're also processes that help you secure the data appropriately. And again, as I mentioned, it's a combination of processes and technology. And it really talks about creating a defense in depth approach, so that you're not using, or you're not dependent on one single process or one single piece of technology to make sure that you're protecting data appropriately. Many of the guidelines heavily rely upon, yes, they rely upon encryption and establishing a root of trust. So what are roots of trust for an IoT device or an IOMT device? Well, a root of trust really establishes an immutable device identity for a particular device. And this is typically done at the time of manufacture. And what it entails is actually taking a number of encryption keys that are defined, and you inject them into the device during the manufacturing process. What does this enable? This enables the ability to authenticate and authorize a particular medical device so you can ensure privacy of medical data. For IOMT and IoT devices in the medical arena, it turns out that PKI is an ideal solution for device security. And what I mean by that, it supports a bidirectional trust model, and that means that the cloud entity can trust that they are talking to a secure IOMT device, and vice versa. The IOMT device can establish a very strong level of trust with the cloud entity. And all communications between the cloud entity and the IOMT device are done via TLS in a secure fashion, and data is exchanged, and when it is exchanged, it can be authenticated and validated. And this typically using a public key for every one of the messages that go. So for example, a public key for a patient, every patient is issued a private and public key. The public key is then communicated down to the IOMT device and is used to encrypt a message that only the private key can be used back in the pharmacy or wherever, can be used to decrypt the message and be able to read the message. Furthermore, the IOMT device can actually digitally sign the message before leaving with its private key to ensure that you can validate that the whole message is there, and that you're authenticating this message actually has come from an IOMT device that is part of the larger cloud community. To really bring this, to really understand the concept of using PKI with an IOMT, let's look at a specific example. So let's take a look at a hospital bed in a healthcare environment. There's a lot of connected functionality that's built into a lot of the new hospital beds. And one of the most prevalent is real-time location services, or called RTLS. What that gives is patients and caregivers the actual location of not only where the beds are, but they can also, the hospital can understand where are the patients by implementing a simple RFID tag into the patient's band. the bed can actually read that RFID and understand, is the patient in the bed or in the room, and has the caregiver, because the caregiver also has a band, has the caregiver come by to the patient and given them the appropriate medications. As I mentioned, with the RFID and the combination of the real-time location systems and the bed, the beds nowadays are very much like the Star Trek movies of the past, where the patient lies down and they can monitor the weight and other vital signs. It's actually very interesting. They can also monitor the side rail. If the patient has exited the bed, have they fallen out of the bed, they can also use this as a means for emergency communication, and also monitor the status of the wheels. As the bed being moved around, maybe to the room next door, or maybe down to the operating room. And additionally, when a doctor comes by, many of these beds are now incorporating EMR access, where a doctor can swipe his RFID across the bottom of the bed, and the EMR immediately comes up, and you can see what are the patient records for the patient that's lying in that particular bed. It's important to be able to secure the data, and there's a number of HIPAA requirements. The PKI technology, as we talked about before, enables an IOMT ecosystem with end-to-end security and message exchange. And it enables data that is stored on the IOMT device to be uniquely encrypted via a patient's public key and digitally signed by the private key on the IOMT device to ensure that you have integrity of data throughout the whole ecosystem. This effectively creates these encapsulated little silos of data. Each of these silos represent a scope of data specifically for that particular patient. So let's look at the operational IOMT and IoT triad, what we call. So you're going to have three basic things. You're going to have, on the left-hand side, you're going to have a certificate of authority that provides a very high volume PKI and cloud services to be able to inject this immutable device identification during the manufacturing process. And IoT device is really also always talking to a cloud service provider of some sort. And in this specific example, I'm just listing Amazon Web Services, but it could be any of over 500 vendors that are in the IoT space today. Then you also have the medical devices themselves, and they have to have the ability to communicate securely, as well as perform the necessary encryption elements that are needed to be able to protect data. Now, in this particular case, a new patient will come in to the hospital bed, and they're admitted to the hospital bed. The RFID is swiped, and the medical device, which is the bed, communicates with the certificate of authority to be able to get the public key, which says that any data that it now collects and sends back to the cloud service provider on the right, it will encrypt using the public key for that particular patient. And then it will also digitally sign that. And then the cloud service provider also has the ability to get these public and private key pairs from the GlobalSign PKI and be able to appropriately collect and monitor that particular data. So again, this triad gives you a vision of what it is to be able to create secure communications, not only from the medical device and storing this medical data for an individual patient, and making sure it's secure not only at the device level but also at the cloud level using PKI technology. IOMT device security. It's really all about creating an IOMT secure ecosystem, and that requires a strong operational triad of technology like I showed before in the previous slide. This requires a higher performance certificate authority with a scalable PKI solution that's really meant and designed to be used in the IoT and IOMT environments. It also requires software that's engineered for the rigors of embedded computing on IOMT devices. and the ability to be able to do encryption and decryption at a medical device level that is also interoperable with stuff that's in the cloud as well as the PKI provider. It also needs to be scalable and secure and be able to work with all cloud computing resources. In this particular case, Allegro provides engineered connectivity and security toolkits with FIPS-validated cryptography specifically designed and engineered for use in the rigors of IOMT and IoT devices. In this particular case, in the triad, we're also using GlobalSign as a very strong provider of PKI, provides an unparalleled solution specifically engineered to meet the rigors and demands of IOMT environments. Thank you very much. If you'd like a copy of the slides or if you have questions or comments, please feel free to text IOMT security to 44222 or visit the bit.ly link here and you'll be able to download the slides and be able to get in touch with me directly. Thanks again, and I look forward to talking with you soon. Take care.